Hi, everyone. I'm Alexis Williams, co-founder of Business Skills for Health Professionals, and welcome to the Beyond Clinical podcast. In this podcast, I'll be interviewing health professionals from diverse backgrounds who have moved into unconventional roles beyond clinical. We'll be hearing their stories and tips, and I hope that this inspires you to pursue unique career paths. Today is episode 17, and I'd like to introduce my guest, Nema McGlynn. Nema, do you want to say hi to the audience?
Yes, hello. I'm so happy to be here today. Thank you, Alexis.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me. So I'm going to share a little bit of background on Nema. So Nema is a registered dietitian with extensive experience in healthcare research and food in the food and beverage industries. As the manager of R&D for Enhanced Medical Nutrition, EMN, Nema leads projects expanding to clinical research, product development, nutrition education training, recruitment, and onboarding. Throughout her Master's of Science in Nutritional Sciences from the University of Toronto, Nema learned how to conduct high-quality evidence synthesis to inform dietary and clinical practice guidelines. She uses these skills to manage 16 clinical trials that utilize EMN's medical food products to assess their impact on clinical outcomes among patients undergoing surgery. In the realm of product development, Nema collaborates with food scientists and ingredient suppliers to create evidence-based products. She then works closely with sales and marketing to produce knowledge translation resources that educate healthcare professionals and patients on the science behind these products and how they were designed to support recovery from surgery. Nema loves collaborating with teams to work on problems that provide impactful solutions to complex problems. In her downtime, she enjoys discovering new culinary delights, pushing herself physically through various fitness endeavors, listening to podcasts, and going on adventures with family and friends. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining. I'm so
Thank
excited to
you.
hear more about your story. Yeah, so I usually like to start out with a fun question. Do you have a favorite health and wellness trend at the moment?
My most recent health and wellness trend is something that I didn't actually mean to fall into. It just kind of happened. So, to give you a bit of background, I started, there's a like new gym that opened up close to me. This was just kind of like midway through the pandemic or near the end of it, and I was so sick of working out at home in my
Yeah.
little condo that I just wanted to be around people and kind of get inspired. At this gym, there is a steam room and a sauna,
Mm.
and it's very convenient. They've got like really nice showers in there. So I've totally turned into one of these people who do steaming, sauning, and then cold,
Oh, you do the
cold
cold
showers.
plunging.
I do. So I've there, they don't have like the actual cold
Yeah.
bathtub that you can jump into, but they do have like, the showers can get pretty
Yeah.
cold. So I just end up doing that. And originally it was more, I'm like, oh, it just feels so good to sit in a steam room. And then afterwards, like the last thing you want to do is take a hot shower.
Hmm.
But I think what was surprising is just one, the steam rooms I find incredibly relaxing.
Hmm.
And then the cold showers, I actually just find them incredibly rejuvenating. So I'll try to
Yeah.
even take them before I start my day.
Hmm.
Yeah, just like a minute, and I find it just, I don't know, there's something about it that really wakes you up
Hmm.
and energizes you. So that has been my recent health trend that I've
That's
gotten
so
into.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm kind of into it a little bit. I did some cold plunging this weekend in Georgian Bay.
Oh, nice. That's
But yeah,
awesome.
I've tried the shower thing. It's intense. I feel like that one for me is tough for some reason, but good
That's
for
so
you.
That's hilarious because I find the cold water plunge is actually I'm the opposite. I find that one extremely
Harder,
difficult.
yeah.
Yeah, we did Boda Boda in Montreal
Oh,
actually
okay.
last week, and they had the bat like a number of those cold backups throughout the
Tubs.
place. Yeah, so we were trying to beat our record. I think I was doing 2 minutes, but
Okay, yeah.
I just found it incredibly painful, especially around the ankles
Yes.
after that
Yes,
point.
I did wear water shoes, I should admit. Which actually makes a big difference. But anyway, yeah, that's a big trend right now. Good for you. I
Thank
love
you.
it. Yeah. So yeah, I'd love for you to tell us about your career journey, and we have some connections if you want to throw that in while you talk about your career journey.
Yes, yes, I'd love to. So when I was first kind of thinking about what do I do, I was in high school and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just knew I had to go to university because that's what my parents were basically saying. You need to figure a job. You can't live here forever. So I actually started off in criminology
Oh.
at Carleton University in Ottawa. It was more just something that I thought, okay, I think I might be interested in this. Maybe I'll work with the Secret Service doing something with youth offenders.
Mm.
As I got into the program, it became more clear that, okay, this is kind of something that is more of it's a general interest, but it's not really something that I want to do forever. So
Hmm.
from there, I went to the Career Center and I just started looking at what are different job opportunities and especially which ones are going to be kind of, in high demand in the future. And that's where I saw dietetics.
Oh.
Yeah, I didn't even know that that was an option. And when I was looking into it, I kind of went, this is actually something that I'm really more passionate about.
Hmm.
So I completely switched. I actually had to go back and do high school chemistry and biology and math because I was in that OAC
Right.
cohort at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had to go back and do that. Then eventually finished my undergrad at St. FX. And then for there worked in home care for about a year. Because again, I was like, I don't know what
Yeah.
area of nutrition I wanna work in. After doing that for about a year is when I came to Loblaws. And that
Yeah.
is where we met
Yes.
for the
Yeah.
first time. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You were the dietitian at our flagship store at the time at Maple Leaf Gardens, which was so exciting. That was an exciting
Oh,
time.
it was amazing. I tell you, like being able to be a part of that, especially when you were literally building it from the ground
Yeah.
up. And I think when I joined, there was maybe only 10 of us
Yeah. It was a
all
small
together.
team. Yeah.
Yeah, very small team. But it was so much fun because like we were also close knit. We could
Hmm.
collaborate a lot. I know at the store level, they were very just open to trying out new things and having dietitians in store.
Hmm.
So it was wonderful experience to be able to connect with the community around the store because there was a lot of diabetes education centers, outpatient clinics. Um, Even like well, now like Toronto Metropolitan University's
Hmm.
Anatomy Center was next door too, so we could do a lot of sessions with them. But even with PR marketing, doing a
Hmm.
lot of kind of like in-store company-wide themes for
Yeah.
patients and customers, and then we did like one-on-ones and stuff with the cooking school. So I would say overall that was a very well-rounded experience, especially when you're first starting off in your career, because not
Hmm.
only, were we getting the one-on-one clinical experience, but kind of in a public health setting, and then
Hmm.
also working with multiple departments across the company and
Yeah.
learning how they operate. So yeah, so it was from there, and especially a lot of the stuff that we were doing with PR and marketing, and you know how they
Hmm.
you got to get them information really quickly, but sometimes they don't really understand the nuances of
Yeah.
nutrition. And that's really when it became apparent to me at the time that I was like, oh, you know what, I'm lacking a little bit of my own knowledge in terms of what is the evidence base that informs a lot of the things that we say. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, so from there, that's when I moved into a master's.
Hmm.
Um, so I did it at University of Toronto under Dr. John Stephen Piper. The project was basically conducting like a meta-analysis to look at the evidence on how does diet pop work as a replacement for sugar sweetened beverages compared to water, to try to answer and provide evidence for dietary and clinical practice guidelines, which were all over the place around like, are low calorie sweeteners good or are they bad? To really look at, well, like, how do they function? How do they work compared to water, which is a recommended standard? And we would expect them to work the same. But then how do they work as a replacement for sugar, which is really the intended use of them? So that was wonderful experience because I got to work on like a clinical trial there. And then also, you know, doing the evidence work with John, you know, to update these guidelines and essentially provide more recommendations and tools for healthcare professionals. I was at the time thinking maybe I'll go on and reclassify and do my PhD, but I realized from it that, you know, the research is super interesting, but it felt a little too, like I wanted to work more in terms of like getting that information directly to the people as opposed to doing the research behind it. So that's essentially what brought me to enhanced medical nutrition, where I am now. So it's a really nice blend between what we did at Loblaws, so using all that work, and then combining it with the clinical experience, the research experience, but then getting to use it within multiple other functions like, okay, so how do we design an evidence-based product based on what we know that people should take before and after surgery, and then kind of the business implications of that, like how do we control costs, how do we make sure that people adhere to it, etc. So yes, that was a very long answer, but that's what got me to where I am right now.
Yeah, it's very interesting, just like kind of like that not first role, but the role at Loblaws, which is a big grocery retailer for anyone that's not familiar with Loblaws in maybe outside of Canada. You kind of got to blend like, clinical, community, and business. And then you went deep on the sort of clinical research area. And then you went into something that's like a bit of everything, right? Like you have clinical research, but you also have that business, like that business skills that you would need, which I find super interesting. And I probably just kind of led you into the next question about like, what are some of the skills that you found transferable?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question because I think there's so many skills that are transferable from dietetics or any sort of like health background. So first, like the research skills are so important. The main thing is I just found they really help you how to identify gaps and how to identify, well, what's the so what of the research that you're doing? Like, how is this implementable? And that has been really useful in ways that projects that I never knew I would have to do. So even doing market research to assess our competitors, or thinking about, like, for instance, when I first started, there was no real onboarding program. So it's sort of like using the research skills to figure out, well, what's the best practices around how do we get new colleagues onboard into a company so that they can, reduce, time to productivity.
Yeah.
So that's where I think the research is very, very transferable. Some other key ones, and I'm sure many of the other guests have said this one, is the communication skills.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so really, I can't imagine any career where you don't use it unless you're just in an office crunching data all day long. But even at that point, you're probably going to have to speak to someone at some point. And I think in terms of, I don't know about you too, but as we progress through our career, just how to make communication better and all the elements of it. So really good listening skills, even little things, like not anticipating what you think the other person is going to think, but just kind of going into it really open.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Asking the right questions, that has been a really big key one to be able to problem solve a little bit
Mm-hmm.
better. My goodness, those are two key ones. There's so many other things that have helped. I think especially too when it kind of goes hand in hand with communication is also just, I feel like healthcare providers also are naturally empathetic.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And it's something that I've realized even for some roles within the company that not everyone possesses a skill, and it's
Yes.
not something that you can easily learn.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of people have like maybe cognitive empathy, but in terms of actually being able to feel the feelings of the other person and put them
Mm.
in their shoes is something that's very important. It's a very important transferable skill when you deal with people.
Yeah. Especially if you're in any kind of like leadership role.
Yeah.
I think it's super important. Yeah, I was thinking when you were talking about communication that maybe something we haven't talked about with any other guests is like the transferability from, because you did a lot of media and PR work, because you were
Hmm.
at like a flagship store within the grocery chain. And I feel like that would have served you well, in terms of like just feeling confident communicating and key messages and that kind of skill. Did you find that?
Oh, big time, big time. I hadn't done that much public speaking before coming
Mm-hmm.
into that role, and that was actually one of something that we all did a lot of.
Yeah.
And as you said, even talking to media and learning how to talk to media versus speaking to individual clients versus,
Mm-hmm.
maybe some of the directors within the company.
Yeah.
Um, so that was very useful because it helped me learn, maybe how to condense my message for different audiences and how to
Mm-hmm.
properly communicate with them.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, can you talk a little bit about like networking, both any like networking kind of within the industry that you're in now, or kind of how you network throughout your career?
Yeah, so well, naturally, I love speaking to people in
Yeah.
general. So I networking is sort of something I think I throughout the years, I've tried to make that as authentic as possible. So I, like a lot of the times, when we're meeting new partners within the company, I find it's a great opportunity, even with them, to establish really solid relationships, because they've actually been extremely useful in even getting me connected to other resources
Mm-hmm.
for things that we have needed, even within the company or even for external friends or families in terms
Mm-hmm.
of, so this podcast especially, let's say, is about helping people transition from one career to another. But some of the networks that I've been able to speak with individually, just doing my job talking to people, has been useful to help other individuals find jobs because they'll let me know maybe when things are available and I can connect
Mm-hmm.
them to different individuals. Even within like the colleagues that we work with
Mm-hmm.
as well, sometimes when you're working with them day to day, you don't actually get time to know who they are personally. So
Mm-hmm.
we try to do a lot of team building events to kind of get us out of the office
Yeah.
and getting to know each other a little bit more. So in terms of just like the colleagues that I work with, that has been useful. I would actually say like one of the biggest things has been working with consultants.
Mm.
So I know not everyone will get the opportunity to do
Yeah.
this, but anyone who can, that has actually been huge. The main reason is one, they have such expertise in their
Mm-hmm.
area, which is typically why you're working with them. You can learn so much for them. And they also tend to have a big network in the fields that
Mm.
they're working in too.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're like
Yeah.
one to many, right? Like if they're a marketing consultant, let's
Yes.
say, like they have a lot of other companies they work with, so lots of opportunity to make connections.
Exactly.
That's a great one. I would not have thought of that, but so valuable. Yeah. So what did you find was like the biggest learning gap? Maybe to kind of go from more like that scientific background into like a business role, or like kind of a bit of both you have now in your role. Like what did you have to kind of learn the most about?
Yeah, I think some of the challenges I experienced was how do you make decisions when you have so little information available to you?
Mm,
So I think just, and that's actually something that I've been trying to learn more about is the actual decision-making process.
hmm.
Because I think, especially in like some of these roles when you move from clinical to business, and I think a lot of people go this through clinical as well, like you're never going to know all the answers.
Yeah.
And then sometimes when you don't, you've got time pressures on top of
Hmm.
that, or maybe you're working against the status quo where, if you get the answer wrong, there's a further fall from grace as
Yeah.
opposed to if it's right. So I think with that, yeah, like learning how to more properly make better decisions, because this is something that's going to happen in anywhere that you
Yeah.
go. Um, but then also having, I think, just building the confidence to be able to connect with your team and really build up that team so that they understand how you think and you understand how they
Hmm.
think, so that you're all working as a unit.
Hmm.
Being where I'm right now in a startup is obviously probably easier to do because the team is so small.
Yeah.
But even at Loblaws, within your departments, you're pretty tight knit.
Hmm.
And I think, yeah, that's probably one key thing that I've really had to learn how to develop, and I'm still learning a
Yeah.
lot about, is how to more properly make decisions, but gaining the confidence to do that
Yeah.
and communicate it.
Yeah. No, it's a tough one, especially coming from like a scientific background where you want to have all the variables on the table and you want to critically evaluate it with all the evidence. And
Mhm.
sometimes in business, like that isn't always available. Um, and sometimes time does not allow for that level of analysis.
Yeah.
But it is important to start like thinking about data and more like database decision making for sure. So yeah, that's a really good
Yeah.
one.
It's kind of like what's that saying? Progress, not perfection.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
So that's something that I've kept in my mind a lot because
Hmm.
you're like, yes, could we make this better? Of
Yeah.
course. But you know what? It's good enough. And sometimes at the end of the day, I'm like, people still aren't getting anything. So we need to get them
Hmm.
something.
Yeah.
And then we can make it better along the way.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I think that applies to like, like you said, working in a smaller startup or even like entrepreneurial, like the need to make progress and not get stuck in analysis. Because yeah, you won't gain any traction in that state.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a great one. So what do you love most about what you're doing now?
Um, well, as you probably gathered from my career history, I love doing multiple things.
Yeah.
So I love learning. I feel like you're always learning in your career, or at least if if you are, then you're in a really good spot.
Yeah.
Um, so what I love about what I do now is I get to basically be able to expand beyond my research or clinical experience. One area that I never knew I would enjoy so much is the human resource side,
Mm.
actually. So, and I think one of the reasons why I love it so much, which is also why I got into dietetics, is the human behavior piece. So why do people
Hmm.
do what they do?
Yeah.
And how do you influence teams internally to build that culture? But then also, in terms of like working with patients or working with surgeons, understanding like what their needs are and
Hmm.
how to kind of meet them where they are.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, the human resource piece surprisingly is probably one thing that I've actually really, really loved. But as we are now starting to scale, it's becoming a little bit too much for me to do
Yeah. Yeah.
here. So it's something that we're gonna like, we've actually started to outsource, which has been helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I see a lot of natural um, synergy with kind of the background of, say, a dietitian and human resources, funny enough. And I certainly
Mhm.
felt like, just in my experience, when you have a large team, human resources becomes part of it. Even if you have the support from human resources in your company, you're still doing a
Yeah.
lot of that day to day. And I think a big part of it that I think we're skilled at is we're always trying to think of like what makes people tick and what makes people motivated. Because it's very similar to like when you're trying to get someone to make a health behavior change, right? Like you're
Hmm.
trying to figure out, okay, like what could motivate this person to, maybe be a bit healthier. And I think that can sometimes transfer well to leadership, trying to kind of figure out like, okay, how do I motivate a team? Just
Yeah.
different ways, right?
Oh, exactly. Like I think anyone who has one-on-one experience, like they
Mm-hmm.
know how to ask good questions. They know how to
Yeah.
get the root cause of maybe why a client can or can't do something. And especially in the HR role, I think where it became so useful is, okay, yes, there's these strict guidelines that we want people to follow, like our nutrition guidelines, but like
Mm-hmm.
people don't act that way in real
Yeah.
life. So it's like, okay, how do we take what we know we want this, like everyone to do, but
Mm-hmm.
look at it pragmatically and try to meet everyone where they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Very
Um,
true. Are there any
So,
things that you're working on like for your own career growth right now? Any courses or areas that you're exploring?
yeah, actually been taking with some of the other leaders within the company, performance management coaching.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, yeah. So, it's something that like I didn't even really know
Mm-hmm.
existed, but a lot of it sort of came up from this idea of like, well, okay, you build your team, like you've got your objectives and you've got
Mm-hmm.
your deliverables, et cetera, that you need to achieve as a company, but it's the individuals that help you get there.
Yeah.
So part of the performance management coaching, which also goes into, increasing the whole time to productivity when new people come in, is, how do you, essentially, how do you act as a manager or a leader to ensure success
Mm-hmm.
for whatever you're doing? So a lot of it is, checking in with your colleagues
Mm-hmm.
regularly. So when new people come in, we're actually checking in with them daily.
Mm-hmm.
And this happens for probably at least a month. And a
Yeah.
lot of it is just so that, you catch things quickly so they don't turn into issues later.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that we actually try to avoid here is, I know it might sound counterintuitive, but like performance reviews.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the idea that like if you've told a colleague something, okay, like this isn't working, we need to do it this way, and then you don't address it again until 4 months later
Mm-hmm.
at the performance review, there's maybe like all these things that were missed in between. So the
Mm-hmm.
idea is that like because you're constantly connecting with colleagues and you're learning how they operate, they learn how you operate. It is a lot of work at the beginning, but then after the first couple of months, like your
Mm-hmm.
communication is just so much more on par.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and actually, I hate to say this too, is like, within these companies as you're growing and scaling, like it's a huge risk to keep people in that aren't
Mm-hmm.
performing,
Yeah.
despite your best efforts to try to figure out what's going on. And to also make sure that those who are performing, that they get the support that they need to continue to grow
Yeah.
in their careers.
Yeah.
So
It's like
that's
real
been
time feedback.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that there's no
Yeah.
surprises.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. And I think it is a gap in a lot of companies. Like, even if I think about my own experiences starting somewhere and like you have maybe this manager who's super busy and
Mhm.
you don't see them for the first week and you're like, well, what am I actually doing? Like there's a whole week that just went by and you ask questions obviously and you try to contact them, but it isn't always the most productive way of onboarding. So that's
Completely.
that's very smart. This question's a little bit of a shift in a different direction, but if there's something you could share with yourself, like when you started your career, your early career self, what would you share?
Oh, you know what? I think the two key things. One is financially plan for the future.
Yes.
And I think like in this climate, nothing could be more perfect to
Yeah.
talk about, like we hear about like the housing crisis, interest rates are still high. Who knows how long they're going to be
Hmm.
high for? Wages really haven't caught up to it.
Hmm.
And I think especially for like individuals who are maybe younger starting their careers, like having money in the bank, let's say for 6 months in case something happened, if they are living in
Hmm.
their own, or if they are living with their parents, like just investing and putting that away. Because it's so nice to have that financial freedom as soon as you can to be able to switch careers
Hmm.
and not have to worry, how am I financially going to do it? Like
Yeah.
then you're not having to make, well, if it's just a choice between two jobs, but you don't really want either of them, but you're like, I got to
Hmm.
choose one.
Hmm.
You just have so much more flexibility.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that's a key one. And then the second one, and this also comes from being an intern, and I know you and I have definitely worked and coached with a
Hmm.
lot of younger individuals starting their career, is you know a lot more than you think you do.
Hmm.
Um, and don't be afraid to ask questions, no matter how silly they are. No one knows everything. But I think I wish I had asked more questions when I
Hmm.
was starting off in my career. And a lot of that was just because I felt like I should know the answer.
Yeah.
Um, when
Yeah.
in reality,
Imposter. You
the
felt like
imposter
you should know
syndrome.
it. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I think just asking questions confidently
yeah,
is such an important, I don't know if it's a skill, but just something to do. Like, and not saying
yeah.
it, like we actually talk about this in one of our courses. When you ask a question, don't preface it with, oh, like I have a silly question or a stupid question. Like ask it confidently and own it. It actually makes you sound more confident if you just ask the question straight up. So
Mhm.
I know it's a tough one, especially like when you're feeling uncertain in the early days.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a great point because that actually reminds me, I know, especially too, like even the way we may inflect, like a lot of
Hmm.
times, inflecting up or
Hmm.
the tone of our voice, like all of that can impact how seriously someone takes you or not
Hmm.
too. And even just helping you build your own confidence
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, that's a great one. Any advice that you can give to listeners who are maybe interested in looking for a role beyond like a clinical, typical clinician role within the health space?
Oh, any advice I can give them or
Yeah, just
any.
like any advice that you found helpful or yeah.
Yeah, so I think what I found really helpful was just I love what you're doing here. And just hearing other people's stories and how they got to where they are, working with maybe a career coach as well,
Hmm.
someone that can really point out to you, because sometimes like you feel like your wheels are spinning, and especially I know now it can be really, really, really hard to find something.
Hmm.
I've had friends that are searching, sometimes for 5 months, and
Yeah.
they've got great experience, but they're just coming into all these walls and barriers because I think the way we're hiring people is also different now as
Hmm.
well. But I think like working with someone who can kind of really help you see things clearly, like, all right, stop doing these things. These are wasting your time.
Right.
These are some of the things that you need to focus on, helping you, like build out your resumes if you need to have like
Hmm.
cover letters. One thing I found very, very useful too, because like I had worked with a career coach in the past, was finding out what my motivators and detractors were.
Mm.
This was very important. They're almost like your personal values, but for work, in
Yes.
that it was sort of like, okay, there's probably a bucket list that you wish every job has, but they're
Mm-hmm.
not going to give you all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of like, what are your like maybe 5 key things that you just need to have, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
the ones at the bottom where you're like, no, this is going to be a clear no for me.
Yeah.
So for example, one of the things that I realized I really wanted was meaningful work, which I think
Mm-hmm.
is probably resonates with a lot of people who go into healthcare, but
Yes.
you can find that in many other industries. But I wasn't so hung up on job security.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, but I also was like, you know what? I don't want like a really long commute
Mm-hmm.
because, like health reasons, etc.
Yeah, you like doing things, fun things.
Yeah, yeah. And then that's really helpful because if you're coming down to, let's say again, you're presented with 2 jobs and you're thinking,
Mm-hmm.
okay, like, oh, they both look really good. Well, maybe one has more of your motivators.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it's sort of like, okay, well, this might be a better choice for me overall. I can deal with some of these other things.
Yeah. That's interesting. I actually met someone recently who worked in HR, and he's created a motivators assessment tool.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it's a really neat tool. I'm kind of digging into it more to see if I would like use it with clients, but it talks a lot about like assessing your motivators on a more strategic way to kind of see
Yeah.
like, okay, when you're interviewing, if you're motivated by, say, the relationship with your manager, like if that's a motivator for you, then you should be asking these questions in your interview for
Yeah.
prospective companies. So I thought it was really interesting, like just like you said, like kind of understanding yourself and what motivates you more.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Um,
well, yeah, that's awesome. Anything else you want to add?
oh, I feel like I talked a lot.
Yeah, no worries. Well, we'll
Hopefully,
wrap up.
hopefully it's
Yeah.
useful. Hopefully it's useful
Oh, yeah.
information. But I'm open if any of your guests or anyone listening to this podcast wants to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Oh, great.
They're
Yeah.
more than welcome to. And if I can be helpful to anyone in that you're
Yeah.
working with or
Yeah,
anything or in your
absolutely.
network, like happy
Yeah.
to expand mine into theirs as well.
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah. I think it is so valuable for people to make connections. So definitely appreciated.
Yeah, of
Awesome.
course.
Yeah, well, I'll do my wrap up. So definitely hope you enjoyed hearing from Nema today and you're feeling inspired. If you want to engage more with the community, you can join our free Facebook group, Business Skills for Health Professionals Community. There's a LinkedIn and a Facebook group. I'll link them in the show notes. I also have exciting, like different ways I can help you as a health professional. I have a career transition program for anyone that's looking to try to make a career transition beyond clinical. And then if you're already working in a non-clinical setting and you're looking for a supportive network, just a few months ago, I launched a network and membership for health professionals working outside of clinical. So I'll put some information about both of those in the show notes. And yeah, well, thank you so much, Nema, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Oh, thank you, you too. And I just want to say I love hearing about all the amazing things that you're doing. Every time I look at you up and see your posts, you've got so many opportunities and things that you're bringing
Yeah.
to this world and the people that you're helping. So I think it's amazing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and thanks for being a guest. All right, we'll sign off now.
Okay, thanks so much. Bye,
Bye.
everybody.